I try to start my composition with an idea of the shape or the direction in mind, in addition to a color selection. So I have my needle tip bottle of isopropyl alcohol here, and I frequently find myself making a composition with a diagonal across the page. But today I find myself wanting to do something a little bit different where I might piece together a composition in phases. So I'm going to start with that and see where it goes. So I'm going to try to do something that curves a bit. And so you may have seen some of my nebula pieces like that. So I'm going to begin at the bottom left corner, working on this area. So I put down an amount of alcohol that is hard to quantify. It's a guess, and you start to learn what works and what you might want. And then if your table isn't level, as mine is not, you will notice the alcohol moving towards you. I put the alcohol down first and then the ink. Some people use a lot less ink than I do, but I really like a highly saturated effect. I shake my gold before applying it. And the metallic I find works best when there's a ground of alcohol already down. And then I apply it, which can be messy. I usually tend to put that in the middle between my colors. My first go-to when I do this type of thing is to begin by moving the paper and shifting, and you can see the blending that begins to happen. Now that I've achieved a bit of a mix and I like where that is going, I use my hand blower. And sometimes I also use a blow dryer, depending on the effect that I'm going for. But I like the really subtle effect of the hand blower. And I also tilt the paper sometimes. And the hand blower helps create a ripple look, but it is not without its effort, because you have to consistently blow the ink back up and away as you do this. I'm working this from both sides, trying to make sure that it kind of moves. And as you can see, it quickly dries, even though I placed a lot of alcohol on the surface. And what I'm getting here is a relatively flat look, without a lot of dimension aside from the metallics. The metallics make it actually kind of hard to see that the colors themselves don't have much going on. So what you can always do is go back in with the alcohol to continue the effect as you move the piece and create more texture. So I'm going to go back in and add a little bit of alcohol up here to sort of let this flow up into it and down. I can control the flow of the ink by folding my paper. As you can see, it's creating much more dynamism, but a more muted color. So I may choose to add some more ink up here to keep it from being too blended and too pale. I will decide in a little while whether I want to add more metallic to it. I think I will, just a little bit up there, because I like to have plenty of the gold moving around. While I do plan the colors and a little bit of the composition before I begin with these pieces, what I cannot plan is what will emerge. What feeling, what sensations, what kind of flow. It's a really hard thing to understand until you're experiencing it. And it goes counter to a lot of the work I've done in the past, which is very result oriented. So I end up frequently experiencing the meaning of the piece as I'm making it. And that's why it's so important for me to show you this process and to help you understand that what happens during the unfolding of this design is organic and not entirely unplanned, but quite organic, quite hard to predict, which can be really tough when you're a person who likes to know what to expect, to know what's coming, and to have an end result that is predictable. This is an unpredictable medium. Once you become more familiar, more comfortable, it is a little bit more controllable. And yet, there is so much about it that unfolds with every piece. The substrate, the inks, and the way they interact with each other is almost always different. The brand of ink can really influence how it goes. It's a fascinating process. It's the reason I'm sharing this video with you. When I start to see the flatness kind of happen in this piece, there's sort of a simplicity of this large section here. Even though there's kind of a swirling effect and I like what the colors are doing, I feel that there's not enough texture or interest. So I start to reintroduce the alcohol to reactivate the piece and to get something kind of new going in the middle here. By moving the paper, I'm creating varying textures, directions. What we have here is starting to look like a bit like a geode. And a bit disorganized too. That tends to happen, and often I find myself going back in to the center of a piece like this and adding color just sort of selectively where I want it to be a bit more, that happens too. Get your tool into your paint. So what I'm going to try to do is very gently manipulate what's going on here with the dark color that I've just added with my air blower, which you can have an amazingly sensitive touch. fact, I find myself wanting to darken that even a little bit further with just a drop or two in the middle. But as you can see, that reactivates the piece, so you have to be careful if you want to achieve a particular effect. Keep a rag handy to wipe my hands off on frequently, because otherwise things can get very messy. I like what's developing here in terms of the mixing of the colors, and I'm finding it to be pretty interesting what's going on. Sometimes you really get up to a point of muddiness, and it can be frustrating because you like an effect, but then it changes, it shifts, and it, again, can be unpredictable how that happens. But with time, you begin to learn what things will work together and which won't. So I'm liking how this is going. I'm going to start tilting this a bit and blowing it while tilting it so that it has the effect of creating a ripple. You work it a bit from both sides, but tilting it will create a more dramatic effect. Sorry. Do a little bit of blending between these two here. Get the metallics moving, because the metallics really tend to want to sit in one place, so you have to really like loosen them up a bit with the alcohol to get it to, and you have to come at it from the other side sometimes. See how the metallics tend to clump together? So there's a lot of effort involved in unclumping them, getting them to spread out a bit across the surface. The air blower can really help break them up a bit, have them be more dynamic, less clumpy. now is a piece that's starting to form into a hole. And what I tend to do at this point is make some decisions about the edges. And you can see where the edges have kind of coalesced here a bit into rather some hard shapes with outlines. That happens with watercolor as well. And you can decide about whether you like the hard shapes or if you want to soften them and blend them out a bit. But I'm not loving this part here. I just feel like it's a little, it looks too unintentional. So I'm going to blend it out and let it curve, and we're going to start to see a C shape form here, if all goes well. Never a guarantee. But when you flow the paper back and forth, you'll start to get a blending effect. And you can kind of try to control that as much as possible. But it really, I think one of the wonderful things about alcohol ink is that taking away your control to some extent is a big part of what makes it the experience that it is. The unpredictability is a design element to my mind. You know, what I'm seeing here is the colors are starting to get diffuse down here, and I really like to maintain the vibrancy. I'm going to go back into this alcohol that I've added here and bring back in my colors. There's a pretty strong yellow here, but perhaps there could be a little bit more of the gold. Just for balance, you're making these decisions on the fly, really. Instinct is such an important part of this process. And how do you get in touch with your instinct? Experience, but also courage. Courage is just deciding that even though you're uncomfortable, you have fear or uncertainty, you're going to just try. You're going to just play. You know, perhaps the playing is the most important aspect of this. Now, a couple more decisions to be made about edges. Let me see if I can show you this whole piece. You can see this whole thing is sort of taking a bit of a C shape. To me, it almost has a jellyfish kind of look. And up here, the question mark is this edge, as far as I'm concerned. Do I want to change that? This is really having some nice effects in this area here. Can see that. The metallics just add such a really interesting sheen and a contrast element. You take a hard look at the whole thing, and you just have to make a call. I think that what I like to try to do is add a bit of a seam. I really like this dark piece here, but it's tough to make the dark sections very narrow because the alcohol, once it hits, it wants to spread. And so you imagine, oh, I'll make this nice little line. That's better done with a marker almost than the ink, because an alcohol ink marker is going to be more controlled and more precise. I do have some dark markers which I could apply to continue this, but I do think perhaps even just in this negative space that's been created here to kind of bring some of this in. So I'm going to take a little risk, teeny tiny risk here. I'm going to put a little bit of color back in here. And add the gold, because the gold framing around it is a really nice effect. Okay. And use my blower, kind of gently play with that. Okay, I need more ink, it appears. Move the ink a little bit. And I've touched my ink to my gold, so I'm gonna wipe it off. So I don't want gold where I am not intending it next time. Just really gentle kinds of manipulations are really important. And I want to keep pushing it. I want to keep making the connection between these 2 points. So I'm going to go outside of my gold here. I'm going to make just an intuitive motion there. You know, I'm going to just add a little bit more because I really like the darkness of this. This is one of my favorite go-to colors. And as you can see, it spreads out. It is not easy to control or limit. But I like what it did. And it makes me want to continue that a bit more. So I'm going to do that. Let it trail off a little bit. There. And I'm going to limit my manipulation of these aspects. I'm not going to add more alcohol. I'm not going to blow it. I'm just going to let it be, because I really like what it just did there. I will blower it just to kind of get it dry, but that's it. And I'm quite happy with this piece. I think that sometimes simplicity is key. Knowing when to stop. I will hold this up